In the face of the great waves of change, it is important that you are not isolated and that other people know who you are and where you are, people who can assist you, people whose wisdom you can rely upon, people who can support you in times of need. This network of relationships, to whatever extent it can be established or is established already, is vitally important. You will need great assistance from others. You will not be able to completely take care of yourself in the face of the great waves of change. You will need others for guidance, for assistance, and, under great duress, you will need someone to help you to feed yourself and take care of yourself. It will be a great dilemma for those who are isolated, for those who have never built a functioning and supportive network of relationships. It is unwise to live far away from the cities, where provisions can be provided and where you can gain access to the very fundamental things that you will need. If you are far away from the cities and are not closely engaged with your neighbors, you will be isolated and on your own. In the future, people will be abandoning their homes in the distant country, seeking food, energy, shelter and security. It will not be safe living alone in outlying districts, as there will be much crime and thievery. This will be due to the fact that there will be many people out of work, desperately seeking for anything that they can use or sell. For someone living alone in the country, they will be very vulnerable, and law enforcement will not be sufficient to protect them, for the needs of rural communities will be so immense that law enforcement will be overwhelmed. That is why your preparation for the great waves must begin far in advance of extreme or difficult situations. If you wait, if you hold yourself back from your preparation, if you wait until there is agreement and consensus, then you will have very few options. You will have very few options and very few choices. Here, as has been the case throughout human history, your strength will lie in knowledge within you and within your primary relationships and community, to whatever extent they have been established. That is why now is the time to begin to share the reality of the great waves with those people whom you know, with your friends and your relatives, even with your neighbors. Perhaps only a few of them will be able to respond, but nonetheless you are building your own social security for the future. For there will be very little social security from your governments. Your situation then has to be completely reevaluated, and that is part of the deep evaluation that will be required. You will have to figure out how to find a way to get to your neighbors, your friends and your allies, particularly if you live in a rural area where the distances can be great. Rural living will become very hazardous unless you have established a high degree of self-sufficiency. But that is very difficult to achieve and can only be prolonged for a certain period of time. In the future, agricultural areas will be protected to some degree, but many people live in rural areas who are not focused primarily on agriculture, thinking they want to be closer to nature as in an early era. Thinking they want to be away from the stress and the difficulties of living in cities and urban areas, they move now far away. But the world is changing. Your situation is changing and will change even more. What you previously sought as a reprieve, as a retreat, now becomes a hazard. When fuel supplies become extremely low and there are shortages, how will you function? Even your nearest towns may not have food, petroleum and medicine, for these things will be focused in large cities, where large congregations of people live. Outlying districts will have difficulty acquiring even the most fundamental things. Everything has to be reconsidered in the face of the great waves of change. Isolation here, even within a large city, is very hazardous. And this is particularly true for single mothers. It is particularly true for the elderly. It is particularly true for children and for people who have handicaps and are disabled. How will they know what to do when there are shortages of food, or shortages of water, or shortages of petroleum, or when they are unable to heat their homes or their apartments? For all these circumstances will arise within the great waves of change, even in the wealthy nations. Do not think here that if you live in a rural area that you can stockpile food and medicine. For how long will that last you? And what will prevent people coming to steal it from you? Coming in the night, coming in the day? Your retreat has now become an isolation, a hazardous isolation. In the future, people will flock to the cities for food, for energy, for medicine and for security. Great congregations of people will come from outlying districts, where supplies will fall short. You do not want to be at the bottom of the list, living in a town or a village. It could take weeks or months for supplies to reach you. People think, oh, this cannot be. It is impossible. This will never happen. But this has happened countless times throughout human history, and in the face of the great waves of change, these circumstances are inevitable. How is your nation going to survive and function on half of the energy resources it is using now? And who will be the first to receive these resources and to receive assistance from your government? It is a different world you are entering, a different set of circumstances. If you can see the great waves of change, if you will take the time to study them, to read about them and to consider them, you will see how absolutely vulnerable you are and how vulnerable people are who are isolated, geographically isolated, socially isolated or circumstantially isolated. That is why it is so important to educate your friends, family and neighbors about the great waves of change, to collaborate with them and to create a plan of assistance, to have contingency plans in case certain things transpire, to have homes where you can gather, to build a reserve of resources so that you are not immediately in danger, and to bond together if necessary, and provide assistance and support for one another. This community preparedness is so vitally important, even in outlying rural areas. You will have to have enough provisions to provide for yourself in the interim, to support people who may come to you who have nothing, to consider the predicament for elderly persons living in your proximity, and to have enough resources to provide for them if necessary or to assist them. This will make the difference between a set of circumstances being difficult and being catastrophic. Community preparedness is very important. It is very significant. That is why this book has provided recommendations for preparing for the great waves of change. These are beginning steps. If people will take these steps, they will be in a much better position. But to change one's circumstances takes time, and takes effort and courage, and is often quite difficult to do, particularly if you are in a family where others do not agree with you. Time is of the essence then. You need this time to consider where you live, how you can get about, where you will be able to provision yourself, where those provisions might be, and to build a network of support with your friends, family and neighbors who are living in your proximity. This will give you time to relieve yourself of unnecessary possessions, activities or obligations that are draining your energy away from this primary focus and emphasis. If there are shortages of fuel, what will you do? This is a particularly serious problem for people living in outlying rural areas or far away from distribution centers. They will be the last to receive whatever provisions can be provided. How are they going to function in their homes, on their farms and in their personal retreats? And how long will they be able to last, even if they have set aside resources and provisions? Even the recommendations given in this book emphasize that stockpiling resources and provisions is only a short-term emphasis. It is only to enable you to pass through shocks or difficult periods. They are not permanent solutions. It is very important, then, that you begin to face the great waves of change and to share this message with others and to honestly discuss with them, if they are open to it, ways that you can be of future assistance to one another if necessary. As you can see through reading the words in this book, what a great and significant thing this really is, how quickly people's circumstances can change, how little it would take to throw your situation into enormous jeopardy, and how utterly reliant you are upon resources coming from afar, resources that you take for granted, resources that you never question. What would happen if they were no longer available to you? You must think of these things now, not emotionally, but reasonably, considering your advantages and disadvantages based upon where you live, how you live and how you travel about. What assets do you have? What are your liabilities? What is the strength of your position? Do you need to change your living circumstances radically in the face of the great waves of change? If so, you will need to do this fairly quickly because these things take time, and time is what you do not have a lot of. If there are shortages of fuel, or if the price of everything escalates beyond what you can afford, what will you do then? Complain? Cry? Break down? Have a tantrum? Having never thought of these things before, the shock will be overwhelming to you, and you will have few choices in what to do. That is why the wise are always considering what is coming over the horizon. They are always looking and watching. They are not afraid and not terrified, but cautious. For all the people who are sensing great change in the world, and there are many of you who are experiencing this even now, it is important to look at what the change might be and how you will need to prepare yourself for it, given whatever resources that you have. Here you cannot rely upon governments or political parties or technological innovations, for these alone will not be sufficient to protect the people of your nation, the people of your city, the people of your town or village, from the great impacts of the great waves of change. Because the climate will be changing, there will be a tremendous loss of food productivity in the world. And because fuel supplies will become more expensive and difficult to get, it will be harder for large farms to produce enough food. Food will be a major emphasis, as it is already in the poorer nations. But even in the wealthy nations, food will be a major priority, not simply the price of food, but the availability of food. That is why you maintain a provision to last you at least a month, so you have time to consider what you must do next and not simply be thrown into panic or desperation. If you can begin to prepare, you will gain confidence. If you do nothing, you will lose heart. You will be defeated before the trials have even appeared, before the difficulties have even really reached you. Some people will capitulate even at the idea that they must reconsider their lives and prepare for the great waves of change. It is sad that their courage and integrity have become so weakened that they would give in so easily. Their plight will be extreme. Now it will be up to other people to take care of them, when in fact it is they who should be taking care of other people. You will see this. You will see all the demonstrations of human ignorance, human denial, human folly and human fantasy in the face of the great waves of change. Everything will become amplified. If someone was being foolish before, they will likely be more foolish now. If someone was living on a set of weak assumptions, they will assert those assumptions even more strongly now. If someone was living in a state of denial, they will increase their expression of denial until they can no longer do so. Here you must be prepared. There will be utter panic, chaos and desperation around you as people, now caught off guard, have to face a really difficult situation for which they have not prepared, a situation that is now undermining their whole life and reality. What would it take to produce such a powerful impact? A fuel shortage in your nation, your state or your region that alone would do it. A violent weather event. A hurricane, a tornado or extreme drought as the planet heats, and all of a sudden, there is not enough water for both human beings and for agriculture.